the handout, which I do regularly, I could just add your email address to the list. And today we're going to talk about a song called Molly Malone, and this Chinese Tang poem, which is similar. It's called 人面不知何处去，桃花依旧笑春风. Lots of people know this poem. And when I do the discussion before that, we'll talk about Louis XIV and musical notations and the primary colors and what's in the news, because there's a lot of news right now out there. And there are lots of words that we were not familiar with before last Wednesday. Okay, so I'm going to go over this list one after another so you don't have to read about it right now, even if I presume you already have a copy. Here I have two words that are not important. I'm not going to talk about them. However, I had them highlighted in red because I spelled them wrong last time. One is couplet and one is assassinate. It's not that I knew I wrote it wrong. I just was careless and missed a letter, that's all. So, and also something I want to talk about even before the vocabulary. First is this Japanese Prime Minister Koizumi. Last time somehow when I was talking, I was too fast and I forgot about the first letter, which is K. And his name is Koizumi. Ko means 小, small, and Izumi is a spring water or fountain, something like that. So his name is Koizumi, and I did hear some people, reporters on the news on TV, calling him Kwazumi, which is definitely wrong, because Kwa is French, not Japanese, and his name is Japanese. Okay. And another thing I went wrong was about Louis XIV. And I did think about it, and I said it was 1649, and I was wrong. It was in 1689 that Louis XIV went down the Rhine River and burned every village wherever he went. That was in 1689. And if you look at this, you could understand why it's not 1649, because that was when he was 11 years old. Yeah. And he became king of France in around that time, 1649. Maybe that's why I mixed it up. He's the son of Louis the 13th, who was born in 1601 and died in 1643. And that was when Louis XIV became the king, actually, in 1643. However, he was way too young to be the king. So his mother, Queen Anne of Austria, which means mother was from Austria, which later became Austro-Hungarian Empire. His mother was Queen Anne, and the mother became a regent, which means 她是摄政. And because lots of people in the country did not trust her because she had very strong affiliation with both Austria and Spain. So they did not believe that this queen can be trusted to have the future of France in her heart when she makes decisions. So she was aided by Cardinal Mazarin, or something like that. And if you read The Three Musketeers, which is either called the 侠隐记 or 三剑客, that's a wonderful story by Dumas, the father, Dumas Bear, 就是大仲马, Bear means the father, and his last name is Dumas. And his son is Dumas Fils, which means the son, the younger one. Okay. And that story, The Three Musketeers, was loved all over the world. And in that book, you could see his opinion. I mean, the author's opinion, which is probably skewed. He wrote the story about King Louis XIII and Queen Anne and Cardinal Mazarin, and probably a fictitious story between the Duke of Buckingham of England and with Queen Anne. The whole story is about an affair between this queen, Louis XIV's mother, and a Duke of Buckingham from England. So I'm not going to talk more about this. So the queen was the regent for a number of years, and then Louis XIV became the king when that cardinal died. 这个红衣主教死了以后, Louis XIV became assumed the real power. Okay. During his reign, here we have this thing, we put an R here. So Louis XIV was born in 1638 and died in 1715, which is a pretty long life, but because he became the king at a very early age, so his reign was very, very long. He was the king for about 71 years, I heard. So that's the longest reign ever. And he was a dictator, very, very strong armed. I mean, everybody must listen to him. Anyone who's not listening would be executed. Okay. And also he engaged the country in many, many wars, some of them big, big wars, fighting lots of very strong neighbors. And that's how he became so strong, became the strongest, biggest, greatest country in Europe. So there are Franco-Spanish War, Franco-Dutch War, and the War of League of Augsburg, and the War of Spanish Succession. These are the big wars, but the first one was when he was little. He did not do much during the Franco-Spanish War, because everything was taken care of by his mother and the cardinal. And he actually assumed the throne, the reign of the country, when the cardinal died. So he decided to become the king, even though he was still quite young. And after all those big wars, there are even more smaller wars, which we probably have never heard of. War of Devolution, War of the Reunion, and so on and so forth. So he is full of fighting spirit. He wanted to conquer most of Europe, and he did. And he put France front and center in the politics and everything in Europe. So he is he's called Sun King. And he had a very good relationship with his mother, and he was forever indebted to his mother for giving him all kinds of, how do you say, he loved the arts and the music and yeah, the fine things in life he learned from his mother. And I put this one here because Oliver Cromwell of England had the King Charles I executed in the year 1649. So that's why the number 1649 is very important. 这是克林威尔，他把英国的国王杀了头。1649年 okay. And Cromwell was a big hero for a while because the king thought his power comes from God and he could do anything he wants to. And he was spending a lot of money. And Cromwell led a civil war and fought the royal army and won. And his parliament sentenced the king to death, and the king was beheaded, chopped his head off. So that seems that's the only time in English history when it was a republic. After Cromwell seized power, the country became a republic. Maybe you don't know about that. It's not too long, for about 10 years. Actually, a little less than 10 years, according to this, probably 9 years, and he's gone. He died of a natural cause. And after he died, gradually the regime collapsed, and Charles II, who was the son of Charles I, became the king. And the Cromwell, I just said he died of a natural cause. However, Charles II became the king, and he exhumed the body. He opened the grave of Cromwell and took out his skeleton and chopped the head off that skeleton. That's how much he hated Cromwell. Okay. And that's where I got the 1649 when I was talking about Louis the 14th, but actually it should be 1689. Okay, let's go back to our vocabulary. The first one is light pollution. It is that when the light, for thousands and thousands, or maybe 10,000s of years, human had no light in the night. So you always go, 日出而作，日入而息. When the sun comes out, you go out to work, and when the sun goes down, you go home to rest. However, ever since Thomas Edison invented the electric light, and the Tesla did all those things to create those power plants. The first power plant in the world was in Niagara Falls, and the second one was in Croatia. So ever since humans started to have electricity, the night no longer is dark. We have lights everywhere. Sometimes throughout the night, it's always on. That's why there's light pollution. Light pollution is the presence of artificial light in otherwise dark outdoor conditions. Even though the light may be indoor, it would go out of the window. And of course, there are outdoor lightings. That's why outdoors you have so many lights that you could no longer see the stars. The stars we saw when we were little were so many. I wonder if you remember that. But nowadays, if you live in a big city, you hardly could see any stars. And also were the lightning bugs. I mean, 萤火虫, yeah. We used to see so many of them. And now, yeah, I've seen some videos on YouTube about how Taiwan, lots of people try to help bring back the lightning bugs. I forgot the other name of this insect. It's very common. I just forgot. There are two common English names.
Firefly.
Yes, Firefly, that's right. Graves of the Fireflies was a cartoon in Japan about how the people suffered during and after the Second World War. You can say that it's an anti-war movie or cartoon. Yeah, that's Graves of the Fireflies. If you haven't seen that, try to find that to watch. It is lovely. It is heartbreaking. Uh, you can always borrow movies I recommend from the library. They always have whatever it is, even though it is very old. This one is called Graves of the Fireflies. Light pollution competes with starlight in the night for urban residents. 所以你住在城里的话, your light, the light that you and your neighbors or your city turned on during the night, competes with the starlights. And of course, the starlights are so far away, they cannot compete. So interferes with astronomical observatories. Observatories, we talked about that last time, about the one in Los Angeles called the Griffith, I think. Like any other form of pollution, disrupts ecosystems and has adverse health effects. So this is more subtle, which we could not detect on a daily basis, but this artificial light really interferes with the nature. Yeah, all the animals in the nature and animals ourselves, our system, our circadian system, which follows the sunlight on a daily basis, it'll be disrupted by turning the light on and not turning it off. So, for example, we people in Seattle would feel very depressed in the winter because it's dark and it's raining all the time, and we have the highest suicide rates in winter in the whole country. And if you keep your light on and you don't turn it off quickly enough, and in the morning you could not get up to enjoy the sunlight. Every time you see sunshine, you should open the drapery and look at the sunshine outside. That would change your biological, your physical situation. So natural light is a very important, but it's also quite interrupted by our artificial light. So when we say light pollution, it's not just about astronomers observing the skies. It's also about people and other animals. For example, there was a time when I took the train from Taipei to Tainan, and even in daylight or sometimes in the night, all the fields that were planted with the chrysanthemums would have lights. They have light bulbs stringing across the entire field for miles and miles. And that is to make the flowers bloom according to the farmer's wish. So plants also are affected by artificial lights in some way. And the poinsettia, that's what we're having right now for Christmas, 圣诞红. That is a kind of flower that blooms according to how many hours of sunlight it gets. So if you have a plant and it finished blooming and you want it to bloom next year, good luck, because you have to provide the necessary sunlight for it. So in some month of the year, you need to put that plant in your closet so it's not exposed to the light. And then in other months, you have to bring it out and you have to put on artificial light in order for it to bloom at the right time. So all these are what nature meant for people and for plants and for animals. It's very, very subtle, but it's true. Here's a picture of the map of the world in the night, taken by a satellite, I assume. And you can see that there are lots of light in some areas and very few lights in some other areas, notably in Africa and in part of Xizang, Xinjiang, and Mongol. And we used to say in North Korea, it's pitch dark in the night, while Southern Korea and Japan and China had lots of lights. But in the bigger picture, North Korea is very small on this map. You could see the Amazon in South America is so dark, while the eastern part of United States is so bright. Yeah, the west coast of United States is bright too. However, a little bit inside, east of the Rocky Mountains, there's a lot of dark areas. There are, okay. So in this map, you can see Eastern United States and Western Europe are probably the brightest places in the night. If we look at Western Europe, it is so bright in the night, and you could easily see what these things are. This is London and Paris and Madrid, I guess, Rome, and this is northern Italy. I wonder why it is so bright. Yeah, I didn't expect it to be so bright, but this would be Venice, and this is the Netherlands, Belgium, and northern Germany. So northern Germany is definitely brighter than southern Germany. If you look at Paris, not Paris, I mean France. This is Paris, yeah. It has so many lights, yeah. Okay, satellite view of Paris at night. And you can still see, yeah, what Cologne and the what Saint Denis. Yeah, they have two big gardens here. Yeah, you can see these have the least lights. And then we talk about the galaxy. Galaxy is called either Xinghe or Xingxi. That means a big system of stars or a river of stars. And all these stars becomes one system because they were held together by their own gravitational force, 就是万有引力哈. All the big small stars exerts very heavy force because of their mass, huge mass. So they were attracting each other and holding each other in place, and it becomes a system. This is a gravitationally bound system. Bound 就是缠在一起、绑在一起的意思哈。In this system, there are stars and the stellar remnant. That means stars that died, leaving some debris, and the interstellar gas instead of empty void is gas between the stars, and the dust and the dark matters. The last one would be the black holes. So all these elements form a big system. They have big ones and small ones. Small ones would have only a few 100 million stars, and the big ones would have hundreds of trillions of stars, each orbiting its center. Huh? So there are, say, 100 million of stars, and their combined center of gravity would be somewhere within the system, and the entire system would be orbiting around the center. It's like we on the planets, we were orbiting around the sun because sun has the largest mass and attracts all the planets to be around it, around again and again. However, the sun is only one of many, many, many other stars in our galaxy. So the entire system of hundreds of millions of stars would all be held together as a system and revolve around the center of gravity. And many galaxies also have massive black holes, which we cannot see. 就是黑洞, okay? And this is just one picture of a huge, not even a very huge one, a huge galaxy. So galaxies are quite often in this shape, which is called a spiral shape. And there are other shapes too. And this is a typical spiral galaxy. It's called the NGC 4414. And it's about 55,000 light years in diameter, from this end to this end. This 直径 diameter is about 55光年 A light year is the distance traveled by light in the year, which is tremendously long, but this is a 55,000 light year across. And it's about 60 million light years away from the Earth. But nowadays, thanks to Hubble, we launched a Hubble telescope in the sky so we could take pictures of the universe without interference of ground artificial light. So what is a constellation? It is a group of stars that people over thousands and thousands of years decided to make story of. They would look at the, for example, in 杜甫的诗，人生不相见，动如参与商. So there's a Sen constellation and there's a Shang constellation, and it happens to be Shen Yu Shang. I think Shen is Antares and the Shang is Perseus. I don't know. Anyway, so you have all these stars that Chinese give them names and call them this star or that constellation. However, the Greeks, they never consulted the Chinese. They decided this star is also, what's that called? Ursa, I guess it's called Ursa. Yeah, Ursa. Yeah, Ursa, or in English, you would call it Ursa. Ursa Minor and Ursa Major, 那就是大熊星、小熊星了哈。所以这个 here I have it underlined. Different cultures and countries adopt their own constellations for thousands and thousands of years before the true science of astronomy really developed, which is probably the late 200-300, maybe 500 years. But even way before that, each country, each nation, each tribe, each culture had their own constellations and the star names and the stories to go with them. But as the science advanced, people decided that they should all have a common language. So they had the meeting and they decided to name all these stars in the uniform way, internationally recognize which are the stars and what their names should be. That's why now we have a set of 88 constellations that we all agreed to use those names. You can have your Chang'e or whatever, but when you go talk to another scientist in another country, you have to go by the recognized name of the agreement. I think it's called IAU agreement, International Astronomy something. Okay. Traditionally, in the Western culture, they inherited the names of stars. 48 traditional Western constellations are Greek. And in the beginning, the Northern Hemisphere thought people in this Northern Hemisphere, 就是在北半球的人呢, they thought this is the whole world that they know of. But then in the last 200 or 300 years, some people started to go to the Southern Hemisphere, and they realized that there are stars they have never seen before. So they started to give names to those stars that you could see from the Southern Hemisphere. And traditionally, in the Western culture, they have 12 ancient constellations belonging to the zodiac. In China, we have 黄道十二宫. So 黄道 is the surface or the how do you say, ecliptic, 这个椭圆形的轨道, which the earth travels along this 轨道叫什么 focus. Anyway, so you have this sun and the earth and the moon. We all travel around in a narrow sphere. It's almost two-dimensional, okay? So people in China divided this circle into 12 sections. So we had names of the 黄道十二宫, which are different from the traditional Western astrology. In the Western astrology, you have, Shui Ping Zuo, Chu Nu Zuo, Cancer, Aries, lots of all these constellations along this zodiac. However, Chinese have a whole different set of constellations. The origin in 400 BC, the Babylonian or Chaldean astronomy, those astronomers, they decided there are 12 constellations on the zodiac, and they divided the zodiac into this, where now even today you can open the newspaper or get on the internet and check what your fortune would be on this day according to this zodiac astrology. Some people really believe in it, including my daughter, but I don't. I don't think that has anything to do with any living person on the earth, but lots of people believe in that. On the other hand, my friend would do Zi Wei Dou Shu fortune telling based on all these stars, the Chinese way. In 1922, IAU, which is International Astronomical Union, they had a meeting and agreed on a modern list of 88 constellations. Okay, this is just one of them, Polaris. Polaris is the star, it's a star here on this map. And it is, as you can see, the end of the Big Dipper. Here we have a Big Dipper, which is a dipper here. 我们叫做北斗星, huh? So these 4 stars form a dipper. 斗就是装容器, huh? You fill a dough with either rice or beans or whatever. And for them, they use this dipper to dip water, I suppose. Anyway, so this is a Big Dipper with 3 stars along this handle and the 4 stars as the dipper part. This is called the 小熊星, huh? Or Ursa or Ursa Minor, 就是小熊的意思, huh? This is 小熊星, and the biggest star in the entire system is this one, which we call Polaris. So a lot of people know the word Polaris. For example, if you go to Alaska, you could see that they have a state flag that has a Polaris. Actually, when they founded Alaska, the state of Alaska, they had a competition for people to submit their entry to suggest what their state flag should be like. And the winner was a child, maybe 11 years old. And he suggested that the state flag should have the Polaris in this flag. Okay, so this whole white area is what the International Astronomical Union decided should be one of the constellations called the Ursa Minor constellation. And there are 88 such areas in the whole universe, covering every conceivable area you could think of. Okay. Then we have this meditation, which came from the I wouldn't say it came from premeditation, but premeditated murder. But the original word is meditation, and the premeditated murder came from the word meditation. Meditation is a practice where an individual uses as a technique such as mindfulness or focus on a certain object or thinking or activity to train their attention and awareness to achieve a mental clarity and emotionally calm and stable state. That is what's called the meditation or 静坐, 打坐, or 沉思, or 冥想. These are all the translation for the word meditation. And it used to be a simple thinking in the East. The West hardly ever did that. They were too busy running about doing their things. But then in last century, people started to think about meditation as a way to calm yourself, to conduct business, and to improve your health. All these things that were not originally of a religious nature. So it started in probably India. Vedas is Feitor. Hinduism and Buddhism, they all have meditation as part of their religious tradition. Then it's slowly spread to Western Europe. It is said that meditation may significantly reduce stress. You know, if you're too busy or too stressed out or too worry too much about your daily life, take out a few minutes or 20 minutes or so to do some quiet meditation. It would reduce your stress and anxiety, depression, and pain, and make you feel peaceful and calm and feel better all around. Here is a word, meditation. It is from an opera called Thais, and it is being played right now for free if you go on Metropolitan Opera today until 4:30. However, I found out that even though at 4:30 they should change to the next opera, if you open the website before that, you can get there even after 4:30. So if you go right now on internet to metopera.org, O-R-G, and pull out this opera, which is Thais right now, then you can possibly watch it even after the class or even tomorrow. I've done that too. The next day, if I was watching it and I stopped it, I paused it, and I went to bed, and I came back the next day, I opened it, and I could still watch that opera, even though they've moved on to the next one. And this is an opera by Massenet, and it has this beautiful, beautiful music, this piece of music called the Meditation. And I hope you would at least go on YouTube to look for this piece of music. It's one of a handful most beautiful music ever in the world, in my opinion. And I took this picture, I think this morning or yesterday. No, I guess it's last night. Anyway, I just took a screenshot, and you have this violinist on the right-hand side and this conductor on the left-hand side. And this looks to me like a young man, but he was only 10 years younger than I am. But he sure looks very young. His name is David Chen, and he was born in 1958, and he's from Singapore. And he is not just a violinist in this whole orchestra, because they call him concert master instead of a violinist, because he's so good. It's very, very good. Just go, if you don't watch the whole opera, you can just search on YouTube for either David Chen or Meditation from Thais. All these things will take you to him. And this is another picture I took. And this is a picture I got from YouTube, because the same person played the same music on April 25th of last year. They shut down the opera house for that year and this year. We're not going to have live in-person opera going on. However, they show free opera streaming, one a day, every day since March. And on April 25th, instead of a regular recorded opera, they had at-home gala, the last few words, at-home gala. It was a concert they did over Zoom, and this David Chen, he chose to play this famous meditation during this gala. And the other guy, he is actually a conductor of the opera orchestra. His name is Yannick Nézet-Séguin, and he accompanied David Chen on the piano, and they were each in their own homes. And you can see clearly the two pictures were not one picture. Each person were in his own home, and they played this song. And this is also on YouTube if you choose to watch that. So he is apparently about 12 years older than he was in this picture. So he was like close to 50 years old. Yeah. Now he's 62. Okay. We move on to this word called movement, which we know as you can move yourself and you can make some movement. For example, I told you that Rush Limbaugh once said, I love the feminist movement. 我很喜欢这个女权运动. However, he did not mean that. He loves the way women move when they walk. So he says, I love the feminist movement, especially when I walk behind it. Okay, so movement means this 运动 or some kind of 活动. And here we have this movement as a 乐章. You can say it's a chapter in the symphony. You have a symphony, which is a 交响乐, and symphony developed from one movement to two movements to three movements, and eventually they settled on four movements in the 18th century. So most of the symphony you listen to, whether it's Mozart or Beethoven, they were in 18th century, and they usually have four movements, except one by Schubert. He only wrote two movements. So even though he finished, people say that symphony is called unfinished symphony, because it only has two movements, even though he intended to write only two movements. So when you have 4 movements in the symphony, they are usually in this form, but not necessarily. The opening allegro, which is a quick one. Last time we talked about allegro, which is a faster pace, 行板. And the second movement is slower, which is in adagio, 慢板. And the third one is usually a dance, a minuet, 小步舞曲, minuet or scherzo. So that's the third one. And the last one is to bring it all together, also usually an allegro or rondo or sonata. And when we compare that to八股文, we have 起承转合. That is when you have a piece of preferably artistic work, literary work. You have the first part, which is the initial part, and then it's a follow-up part. And the third one is a turnaround. Something changed in the third one, and the last one has everything back together. So when you have 4 movements in the symphony, it's like a 八股文的起承转合, very similar. Of course, each single one can have a different way of how it goes. It all depends on this one composer who decided what to write in this his own symphony. But as a whole, it's usually 4 in this sequence. Another musical term is measure. Measure is when you look at this music and you have all these 五线谱, that's called a staff or stave. We'll go into that later in the next one. So when you look at this music, you can see horizontal lines, and between 2 of them is a measure. 一个小节就是2条线中间的这一段, it's called a measure. And here I have Prelude by Chopin, and Prelude is a 前奏曲, da di da dun 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 dun. I'm a little off. So Chopin wrote this, and just like any other composer, he would write the music. In his case, it's a piano music, so it has 2 staffs. On the top, it has this thing, and on the bottom, it has this thing, and followed by this key signature and the time signature and all these words in Italian. For example, this P, I told you this P means piano, which means low volume, light sound. And here's dolce, which means sweetly. This is a standard musical sheet that has all these elements. And of course, the important part is where all the notes are. You have a quarter note or with a dot, or a half note, and eighth notes, and so on and so forth. And those rest. Here you have a rest, and here you have a rest. And we're going to discuss right now about all these parts of musical notations. So the staff, which is 五线谱, sometimes called stave or staff, that is just the whole thing. And the notes is 音符 in it, and each note has a pitch about how high or low this pitch is, and duration is how long it lasts, and the rest is when it's not a note but a void. No sound should come out, that's a rest. And dots is to extend the duration of a note with a dot behind it. Then we have clefs, we have treble, bass, and we'll go over them one after another, okay? So first we have this staff with notes on it, and this is one note. It's got a stem, 符杆, and this 符什么? 斧头, I don't know. how do you call that in Chinese? Note head, and the little tail after on top of it is called a flag. So you have fu gan. I know this is fu gan, but I don't know how do you call that in Chinese. Note head. Okay, so this is one note, which is the eighth note. Then we come to the word pitch, which means how high this note represents. And if it's here, is la in under middle C. Here is a middle C. And you have la, 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 li, la, la, di, da, 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 di, da, da, from here, da, da, di, da, da. But there are two before it. So when you start with an A, it's a minor tune. And when you start with C, it's a major. Then for each note, we have how long it lasts. This one is a whole note, and this one is a half note. And on the staff, you can represent them this way. This is a whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and even more after that. Here is one other way to say it. A whole note, half note, and so on. And here we have after 16th, you have 32nd and 64th. Of course, you can add infinitely. However, nobody can sing or play it so fast, so there's no use writing more tails on it. And on this side, relative to the note, these are the rest. Here is a whole rest and half rest and a quarter and the eighth and so on. Okay, so these are to stop it for a short time, and these are to play the note for a short time, and these are much longer. Here's a dot. The dot would extend the note before it by half. So if you have a whole note which lasts for 4 beats, then the note would extend it by 2. So a whole note with a dot would become 6 beats. And this would be a half note extended by 1 beat. And this is a quarter note extended by a half beat. And also you can put the dot behind the rest, and it also extends the rest by half of what it represents. And clef is a 高音部记号跟低音部记号. This one came from the letter G. It looked like a G. This is a treble clef. And this is a bass clef. I think it originated from F, but it's harder to tell. But anyone who has read music before could tell you that this is a treble clef that starts from middle C. And this is a bass clef that ends at the middle C. So it goes from this C and to this C. So each clef would presumably handle 2 octaves. The bass clef from here to here. But there's the one in the middle, and people usually find it unnecessary to pick out this kind. So we hardly ever see this one, because this one covers all the way to middle C, and this one starts from middle C. So you only need 2 clefs. And this is one alto clef, and this is a tenor clef. So I guess if you sing alto as a female or sing tenor as a male, your music sheet may possibly have this kind of clef notes, and you would be familiar with how to read them, but most people just use this to treble and the bass. And here we talk about key signature. In the front of the music sheet, right after this treble and bass clef, you would put a key signature here, either looking like this or looking at this. And these are sharp and these are flat. So when you have one sharp note here. That means any notes that rests on this line would be raised by half a pitch, and by you would always do this. The first one is here, and the second one is here, and third one, and fourth one. It's the rule you have to follow. And they give you all kinds of different names and sounds to the music you're going to write. So these are the 7 additional key signatures, and that makes 8 variations, and this is another 8 variations. However, some of these are the same as those, because when you put the sharp on something, it could also mean putting a B on something else. So there are overlapped ones. However, because there are major and minor, it's all major, okay? Anyway, so you have all these choices, and it seems that when you choose a certain key signature, the music has a different feeling as compared to when you don't have a key signature there. So if you are a good composer, you would decide on how many of the sharps or flats you want to use. And this is called accidental. This is a flat or sharp mark in front of a note to mark that just for once you have this note behind it changed by half a note lower, or by half a note higher, or to return to what you changed before. So these are the 4 accidentals. It only applies to the note after it, whether it's a flat or a natural or a sharp. Then comes the signature. Okay, when you have a signature, time signature, it's always 2 integers, one on top and one at the bottom. And on the top, it means the number of beats in each bar, in each measure. And the lower number indicate value of each beat. So the lower one says 4, that means a quarter note is 1 beat. If it says 2, then it means the half note is a beat, I guess so. And on top, that means the number of beats. So in this Chopin music, you would be able to see how many. Okay, each the 4 at the bottom means each quarter note is 1 beat, and the 3 on top means in each measure they should all add up to 3 beats. Here's a 1 quarter, 1 quarter, and this one is a half extend, an eighth note extended by half of that, and this one is a 16th note. So together they make up 3 beats. And when you have this whole notes here, that means that the entire measure is just occupied by this one note. Or you have this, I'm sorry, this is not a whole note. It has the stem there. So all these are half notes. So these are 2 beats, and this one is 1 beat. So it is 3 beats altogether, okay? Well, in the beginning, there seem to be many, many rules, but if you read a lot of them, you will know that it's not so hard. And in this picture, we have simple time signatures. Usually you have 4, 4. That's the most common one. And there's 2, 4, 3, 4, and 2, 2, 3, 2, 3A, 6A, and so on. These are the commonly encountered time signatures. At the end of this part on musical notation, I'd like to show you something about China. Musical notations in China. There was an excavation. Here's the word excavation, 就是挖掘, 考古挖掘, huh? What did they find in 1978 in Hubei, Suixian? It's a tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng, 曾侯乙墓哈，这个侯是一个侯爵，所以就翻译成 Marquis 哈。This guy, who is an aristocrat, he died in the year 433 BC. Yeah, 433 BC. And they found a huge trove of wonderful things in the tomb, including whole sets of chime stones and whole sets of bells that were set up for people to play music, not just a musical instrument. It's got extensive inscription, 就是在这个钟上面刻了很仔细的说明 lengthy inscription concerning pitches, scales, and the transposition, all kinds of musical notations on this sets of bells and chime stones. I'll show you some pictures. This one is a whole set. I think this bien probably means a whole set of it. Bells, and each one is a bell varying from this big to that smaller and smaller and smaller. And there were 63 bells in this whole set. And if you happen to look closer, and you can see all these notations about if you want to play this music, which notes, how long, and so on, all the details on this bell. Isn't that wonderful? And after thousands and thousands of years, they're still clearly, you can tell, you can read clearly what they are. And if you hit on it, the sound is exactly right as it should be. Isn't that wonderful? That's 1978. These are the great discovery. And these are Qing, which is called well, what's chime? These are called chime stones. Okay, so these are made of stones, while those are made of copper or bronze. So these are the different musical instruments. So in those days, these are stationary musical instruments that you hit on them like this. Here's another musical notation by Chinese in the year 1425. And if you read it, these are words you've never seen before, this part and this part. They use special notes that the words mean certain notes on the staff, but at that time, we did not know staff exist in the world. So they use all these language to describe how you play this music, which we probably can. I'm sure some people with hard work, they could read this music, but this is the Chinese musical notation. And that's quite inspiring. Okay, then there's a word called conspiracy, which means 阴谋 or 合谋. 阴谋 would mean that you secretly plot something to do something bad. And 合谋 means you're not just one person, you're doing it with some other people, whether another person, or that means two people or three people or a group of people. So it could mean one person doing it secretly, or more commonly speaking, it's a group of people doing it together. And last time I said that if it's murder is a conspiracy, then your crime is higher than if you planned it alone. And of course, all these are all higher than if you just at the spur of the moment you kill somebody. That's totally unplanned. That is not premeditated. Okay, here's this word called conspiracy. Then it extended to another thing, which is a conspiracy theory. That is, when there are regular things happening with regular reasonable reasons and reason that you can prove, or most people would agree that's a reason, but you alone decided, no, that's not it. There must be something bad hidden inside. There must be some powerful people which you did not know that were behind this whole thing and doing something very bad. That's called the conspiracy theory. And the Trump people are quite often like that. Instead of counting the ballots and showing and agreeing that Biden has won, they would say that no, 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 there is something wrong in there, and it must be some bad people who did something, whatever it is, we don't know yet, but there must be something secretly that causes to happen that made our beloved Trump not able to continue as a president. So these people are conspiracy theorists or conspiracists. So they would rather believe something out of the ordinary was happening in secret that made things so different from what they hope it would be. Usually, I always thought Trump used this theory to energize his supporters, to make them believe what he wanted them to believe. Now it seems that he himself believes in those conspiracy theories. He really thought he won the election. At least that's what he says. Okay. So this is the negative word. When we say somebody believes in conspiracy theories, we usually say he's probably not very bright. He does not trust the science or common sense, and he would rather believe something sinister and not what everyone else believed to be true. This is called conspiracy theory. This is just two roads crossed. There's an intersection, so they intersect each other. However, sometimes it can also mean converge. That means two things come together and becomes one, or it can be cut or join or divide, crisscross, bisect. All these could mean intersect. And last time I showed you this picture, which has the green light, blue light, and red light come together to form yellow, fuchsia, or magenta. And this is probably called the light aqua color, Sri Lanka. So you have three primary color light. Together, they could form new colors. And if they all come together, all three of them, it becomes white. So at that time, we were talking about fuchsia, which is also called magenta. So here's a picture of Indian paintbrush, which is a very common flower in higher elevation in this area. If you go to Mount Baker, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, you're bound to come across an Indian paintbrush. And most of the time it is called red Indian paintbrush. But if it's this color, it's called magenta paintbrush. So it's a little bit bluish or purplish. This color is called magenta. So we have these three primary colors, which are light, or we can have three, how do you call that? Red, orange, and blue. They are the pigment. Pigments are different from lights. Let me show you what pigments are. This side is pigment. So you have these colors. When they were added together, it becomes black, while you have this primary colors of light. When these three are come together, it becomes white. That's a difference in light and the pigment. Pigment is 色素 or 颜料. Primary color is the 原色. These are the three original colors with which you can create new colors. For example, these are the primary colors and these are the secondary colors. We say primary school, 就是小学. If we say secondary school, then it's middle school or high school. So the first year of education is primary education, and the second 6 year is secondary education. And you could have the third level of education, which is called the tertiary, that is college education. Tertiary is this word, tertiary, which means the third level. So if you have these three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, then you have the middle one, which is secondary, and those two, even more in detail, they are called the tertiary. So you now with the three colors, you got 12 colors. Okay. So this is a color mixing guide. You can have all kinds of colors. And nowadays, you can come across this on your computer. If you want to choose to paint something in the color, this would show up and you could pick anything you like. You don't have to remember their name or code. You just pick one from this and it'll show up in your painting. I hardly ever do painting on computer, but I do PowerPoint, and sometimes I would make circles or lines and I would choose a color for that line or that circle, and I would choose it from here or from the simpler choices with only 5 or 10 different colors. But this is all at your fingertip on the computer. There's a book called The Primary Colors. It has nothing to do with these primary colors. Here, the primary means the primary election. This is a reporter, Joe Klein, who wrote this because he was sent by Newsweek to follow Clinton during the primary, presidential primary, when Clinton was running for, I guess, 1996. Yeah, it was 1980, 86, 88, 88, 92. Okay, so Clinton became the president in 92, and the 96 would be his re-election. Okay, so Joe Klein wrote this book, which he says is a novel. It's all about a person of different name, but the storyline closely followed Clinton. And this was turned into a movie also called The Primary Color, based on this story. And here's a movie. I've seen this movie. It's got John Travolta, Emma Thompson, and Adrian Lester. On this list, you have all the stars. Of course, John Travolta and Emma Thompson are very famous, but you also have very, very famous people like Billy Bob Thornton, Kathy Bates, Maura Tierney, Larry Hagman, and Adrian Lester, who is here at the end of the list. However, he's put on this movie poster as the third person because he is a narrator of the movie, or he is the person who observed everything that happened during this primary. Okay, so this is a novel of politics, which is called a roman à clef, which means novel with a key. So it's got a key there. If you know the key and turn it, then you know what it's about, because it's about a person or a story or a group of people that everybody knew. But this writer would rather not use his real name. In fact, this writer himself did not use his own name when he published this book. Okay, so when he wrote this book, nobody knew who wrote it, and there was big guessing game. Everyone wants to guess who. It has to be somebody we knew, because he knew so much of it. And in a few years later, it was revealed that his name was Joe Klein, and he worked for Newsweek. Here, I just go very quickly over this, which is I could recite 界门纲目科属种 When you have a plant or animal, we usually just want to know which genus it's in and which species. Genus is bigger and species is smaller. So each one is like 莲蓬 it comes from one and became very many, and then the following level you pick one from the top. So there's the kingdom of animal and plants, but domain is bigger than that. And so it may include some other things like germs and virus. In fact, there is a germ and virus. There are 5 kingdoms in the world, so I don't know. But we only learned from kingdom down, but these names are not necessarily easy to follow. So you only need to know genus and species. And this AI is 人工智能 artificial intelligence, that is to use computer calculating to do things for people so they are safer. You don't have to send the person in there to a very dangerous place, or you don't, it's so much faster. Yeah, artificial intelligence is faster. For example, a chess player, they could beat the best of the chess players. So artificial intelligence is getting better and better, and it is the intelligence of machine instead of real people or animals. And real people and animals would have consciousness and emotionality, while the artificial intelligence presumably do not have these, though they really try to put that into it. For example, there are psychiatrists that are AI. So you would just go to this AI psychiatrist and you say, oh, I'm depressed. And whatever you say, this AI would, it's programmed to respond correctly to you. So if he stumbled, he couldn't understand what you're saying, he would be programmed to say, could you elaborate a little more on that? I don't understand, maybe whatever. So and if you go to a psychiatrist that is AI, or many companies nowadays use AI to answer your telephone. So you have to say things clearly, and you have to, whatever you say has to fall into certain categories that AI is supposed to understand. So sometimes it'll say, I'm sorry, I cannot help you, but they are getting better, okay? So they mimic the cognitive function. They could recognize something, and they could learn, and they could solve problems. Yeah, they could go, for example, when they play chess, they would see some situation that was programmed in their background, that they know how to solve this problem, then they would do something. If it's a real person, of course he has experience, but he does not have such a fast memory. So learning is another thing. If I write Chinese using pinyin, and every time it comes out with a lot of simplified words, and I have to go through hundreds of words in order to pick one at the bottom. But if I do it 10,000 times, this computer that's used by me for so long, it will learn to move these I usually found words to the front so that I could find them quicker. So that is the learning process of AI. We talked about corroborate, which is when you have an investigation of a criminal case or something, then there are two witnesses separately who would say something happened in the same way. So they corroborate each other. So if this person is suspected of murder, if he could find some other people who could tell the police that he didn't do it because he was somewhere else, then these other witnesses would corroborate his statement. Okay, so they would provide an alibi for him to give him a reason to make people believe that he was not there. Okay, that's what this word alibi means. And the interrogation would be what the police was conducting when they investigate this thing by asking questions. 审问或者是盘讯哈。Here's the word lap we were just talking about before we started. Lap is once around a racetrack. However, when you swim, it is one over and one back. Both times together, that's one lap. So that's called the laps. Usually, when we do not use it this way, we would say lap would be on our 膝盖上面, We can put something on your lap. For example, I'm using a laptop. That is what I could carry it on my lap instead of having it resting on the desk all the time. So it's a more portable kind. And when I talked about Tito, Marshal Tito, I said, excuse me, I said that the people of Yugoslavia during Tito's reign, they were more affluent, which means they were wealthier, not when compared to American people, but when compared with people in Croatia, so Serbia, and I'm sorry, these people, Yugoslavia, they are more affluent than people in Hungary or in Czech or in the Baltic states, other states that were occupied by Russia. Yugoslavian people were more affluent. And so they were proponents of Tito because they support Tito, or there are many Trump supporters, you can call them proponents. This is a word novice. When we talked about Helen Reddy in the lyrics, she mentioned the novice, which means a beginner in the religious order. Here's a picture of two nuns. One is wearing a black headgear, while the other had a white gear. It's just these two seagulls. One is all white, while the other one is gray. The first year of a seagull, they have gray colored feather, but the second year, they become more advanced and mature. So just like these two nuns. So in a Christian religion, you have nuns and priests and so on, and they have different level. Of course, after you became a real nun, you could advance into a how do you call that? Abbot is a male priest who had preside over an abbey. Okay, so we have a female that would be a mother superior. Okay, you can advance in different levels, and of course, if you're a man, you could become a bishop, or you could become the pope, but not for women. So these are different levels. However, in our in our secular life, general people, when we don't talk about religion, we could have we could call a person a novice. We could call them a rookie, because they are new in this business or trade. So in the religious order, a novice is under probation. That means you have to have a supervisor telling you all the time what to do or telling you not to do certain things. That's called probation. If you're a criminal, you're on probation. That means you have to go into the police station regularly so that someone could make sure that you are doing the right thing, not breaking your probation. Uh, so this nun is a novice who, before she takes the real vow to become a real nun, she is a novice right now. Here's a picture of a bald eagle. When it's half-year old, it looks like this. And when it's 5 or more years old, it looks like this. So much smarter and mature and just looking very good. So these are all before the bird became really mature. It takes more years for an eagle to mature compared to a seagull. Usually it takes longer. And in the trade, you would have an apprentice instead of having a novice. An apprentice is how to train a new generation of tradesmen by both on-the-job training and giving them classes to study, giving them books to read, giving them lectures, and most of all, giving them on-the-job training. That's called a 学徒, apprentice. And here's an embryo, a picture of embryo. It has a measuring tape on the left-hand side, which says this long is 1 centimeter. So an embryo is about 1 or 2 centimeters long. Well, a fetus can be much bigger. It can weigh up to 10 pounds or even a lot bigger, but at least it's not just 1 or 2 centimeters. It can be quite big. Here's the word invincible. Helen Reddy sang this at the end of each paragraph, each stanza, that I am invincible, which means I cannot be conquered. I have no enemy who could beat me up. That's called invincible. So vincible means can be beaten, while invisible means cannot be beaten. And if you're familiar with the Turandot, which is Puccini's opera Turandot, at the end of the song Nessun Dorma. Nessun Dorma. At the end, he says, Vincerò, vincerò, which means I am going to conquer this princess, because he's going to be beheaded if he could not answer this riddle the princess was going to give to him the next day. So everybody could not go to sleep that night. And our prince said he's going to win. And here is another famous poem by William Ernest Henley. He wrote Invictus, which means invisible in Latin, I suppose. He lived during that time. And this is quite, when I checked, it says the short poem, but I don't think it's very short because it's very hard to remember. And here are 2 lines that are just simply very, very easy to remember. It says, I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. So probably everyone can remember these 2 lines. However, he says, out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul, which means I cannot be conquered. My soul is a soul that cannot be conquered. That's why he picked this name, Invictus. Invictus. It's a very, very rousing poem. I wish you would go online to find the whole text. It is quite lovely. Then we talk about Grimm brothers. This is a pair of brothers, 1 year apart. Their last name is Grimm, and we call them 格林兄弟. And they are great scholars in academics, philosophists, and cultural researchers, lexicographers, which means they write or they critique dictionaries, and they're authors. So they study older language and older literature, and together they went into the field and collect hundreds of folk tales and made them, publish them as sets of children's fairy tales. And there's probably not a single person in the world who has not come across one of their famous stories, such as Cinderella, 灰姑娘, the Frog Prince, 青蛙王子, Hansel and Gretel, that's the name of two brothers and sisters, and Rapunzel, which was made into Tangled by Disney because this girl, Rapunzel, which means lettuce. Her name is Rapunzel because her mother ate a witch's lettuce in the garden, which is Rapunzel, and she was locked by the witch, and she only let down her hair for her mother to climb up to deliver food to her. That's called the Rapunzel. And Little Red Riding Hood is a 小红帽, Snow White, 白雪公主. All these famous stories came from Brothers Grimm's collected children's and household tales. And they published in 2 volumes and republished again and again and again. And their last publication was in 1857. That's quite some time later. And it contained 200 stories because there were less than 200 before. Eventually there were 200 stories. And they not only collected stories and preserved them for everyone to enjoy, they also established a methodology, which means they created a way, a process for scholars to do the things that they were doing, the system, how to collect, how to record, and how to organize them. So their works were very important to other scholars. And they also together or separately wrote other books on linguistic, 就是语音学, or literary scholarships. So these are 2 great people who work together. And you may wonder, well, that's the next paragraph. First, we will say there are more than 100 languages that this book was translated into. And they were also made into numerous movies, especially those by Walt Disney. Disney movie first was Snow White. That was first fairy tale. And then, it's called Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. And there was Sleeping Beauty and many others, okay? And you would find many of their stories very cruel and violent. For example, the very bad stepmother would send the 2 children, very young children, Hansel and Gretel, into the forest to pick berries. And they didn't pick enough and they dare not come home, and they went to the witch's home. So, and the witch would eventually feed them up and throw them into the big oven to cook them and eat them. But they did not succeed because the 2 kids were smart enough. So these stories are very violent. For example, Snow White, the witch stepmother, would do all sorts of bad things, even poison her to death with the poisonous apple, and all sorts of things. But Some psychologists still think that the stories have their values, even though they're quite cruel and violent. And later, the Grimm brothers also sanitized, that is, to make it cleaner or more palatable, to change the stories better. When we go out nowadays, because of the pandemic, we need a sanitizer to kill the germs on our hands. And the brothers Grimm, they would sanitize their story so they would appear less cruel or less violent. This is an important thing, that an object is a thing, that is a table, a desk, or a cup, or whatever, a thing, while people are not an object. And the feminists movement is to tell the world that we human are not objects. We don't want to be objectified, because that is demeaning and humiliating. When you look at a woman, you are not just looking at their breasts, their legs, or whatever. They have their thinking, and you should respect their ideas and not treat them like an object. So this is important for women to think they are not not an object, which would mean that they are not going to spend all day making up and wearing dress so that they would look pretty instead of building up their brain. Okay. I only used to make up one day, half day, on my wedding day. Other than that, I saved thousands and thousands of hours and days, because I don't do that. I don't treat myself as an object. This probably would offend many women, because of course, being a woman, the one delight is to make yourself pretty. But you don't want to be so pretty that you're becoming an object, when people only see you as an object instead of as a human being. Okay. Okay. When we talked about Helen Reddy, I also used all these words. For example, squander, because she made $80 million and she squandered it all on frivolous things. And she later retired from being a singer and went to school, probably Sydney University, because she lived in Australia, and she became a hypnotist. She practiced hypnosis, which means to make people fall into sleep so that they would tell you things that did not know they knew, or things they did not want others to know. That's called hypnosis. Because people, when they went through difficult times, when they were abused, or when they went through some traumatic experience, we say traumatic, 就是 traumatic， 就是很大的刺激使得你受伤哈。我们说这个 PTSD 啊 ，PTSD is post-traumatic symptoms disorder. I guess that's it. When you go to the battlefield in Iraq or Iran, or not, maybe we didn't fight Iran, in Afghanistan, or if you were in Second World War or whatever, after you experience some terrible events, for example, people dying left and right all over, then the shock is so much that it creates a post-traumatic syndrome. Post is after you had this experience. You had all these hallucination or depression or all kinds of psychological ailment that happened after this traumatic experience. That's called the PTSD. And many people would suppress it. Here's the word, suppress. They try to forget about it, and to the point that they don't even remember such things happen. Of course, some people still remember, but they try to suppress the memory of such an incident. That's what the suppress means. An anthem means a song that is we adopt as a group to represent our group. So it could be a country's national anthem, or it can be something else. For example, a school anthem, and it could be many different things. Okay, you can have a chorus with your chorus anthem. And when we talk about Qiujing, we have this word agony, which is much stronger word than anger. Huh? Agony is piercingly painful anger. Okay, and the verb for agony is agonize. You agonize over something. It makes you feel so terrible that this thing happened, or this thing you did, that you agonize over it. And then there's exhume and up the sleeves. Here about agony and agonize, there is a novel called The Agony and the Ecstasy. It was written by Irving Stone, which is a novel, but he would rather call it historical novel because he did huge amount of research. And however, the scholars also always say it's not adhering to the true history. Adhere 就是贴住 adhere 就是根据事实 adhere. Here we have Charles Heston as Michelangelo, or Michelangelo, Michelangelo, and Rex Harrison as Pope Julius II. So they were in this movie. And Irving Stone is quite a famous novelist, and he wrote all these books, and only these are called nonfiction. 4 of them called nonfiction. All the rest are called fiction, but he thinks they are not fiction. They are historical books, okay, nonfiction, but people call them fiction. His first book, Lust for Life, is a biography of Vincent van Gogh. It was a huge hit. So after that, many years later, he wrote this Agony and the Ecstasy. These 2 are the most famous of his books. However, he did a lot of research, spending lots of his time on all these other works, of course, equally taking up his time. There's one about Jack London, Andrew Jackson. There's Lincoln and Mary Todd, and John Adams and Abigail Adams. Sigmund Freud is the 心理学家弗洛伊德, and Heinrich Schliemann, he discovered Troy. Troy 就是希腊 Homer's story about historical war, Trojan War, 就是我们现在叫特洛伊战争. It is definitely a fiction, however, it's a historical novel, and very much adhering to the history, however, with lots of fancy stuff about gods. For example, Achilles, who is the main character in the Trojan War, he was half god, half man, and we know that cannot be true, but who knows. And there's Charles Darwin, there's Camille Pissarro, who's a French impressionist painter. Clarence Darrow is a famous lawyer in America, and Earl Warren is a Supreme Court judge. So all these were books written by him. And another word that people use this word agony is used for is agony in the garden. And the garden is the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane in their language was an olive press. So you have olive trees with olives on the tree, and you would press the olive fruit so that the oil would come out. And the press that you use is just like the press we use to make tofu. If you go to a Chinese market, I hope you still can see that, but in the past, you could go to any market and the tofu vendor would have a soybean press right there, which is round. But for olive oil, this round thing is huge. It could be this big, okay? And the Garden of Gethsemane is an olive orchard where people used to press olive press to get the oil. And this is a place where Jesus Christ had the Last Supper there. And after that, he made a speech to his apostles or disciples. Jesus' apostles are called Jesus' disciples, 就是他的门徒 are called the apostles, which means 以耶稣的门徒, okay? So he had a Last Supper there. And after that, he had made a farewell discourse telling them that I am going to be prosecuted and put to death. And then the Roman soldier came to arrest him. So between the supper and the arrest, that's what the agony happened. Jesus Christ finished talking, finished eating. He went into this Gethsemane, Garden of Gethsemane, and he knelt beside a big rock, and he was praying to God, and he was so agonized that this incident is called agony in the garden, and he was so agonized that he sweated blood. 他出的汗都是血. And there was a recent article, probably a year or two before, some scholar said it is scientifically possible to sweat blood, but I don't know how he proved that. But that is how this thing is so important in this religion, because the agony in the garden is a one major event that happened in the whole narrative of the life of Jesus Christ. And here we have Jesus sweated blood in Hortus Gethsemane. Hortus 就是花园的意思. In English, we say 园艺系 horticultural. 园艺 horticulture 就是从 HORT 这里开始的，这个就是花园的意思. And this is a picture of the olive orchard I took in April of 2006. On the first day we arrived, we went to this place. That's the first thing we went to see in Jerusalem, which is a garden with old trees, but they probably are not as old as 2,000 years old, because they have to be older in order for Jesus Christ to see them. But they are pretty old, yeah. I have seen olive trees 100-year-old that look like this. So it is certainly not a 2,000-year-old orchard. And right next to the Garden of Gethsemane is this church, a Franciscan church of all nations, where the agony took place. What's inside? There is this big piece of rock that we just saw in this painting, that Jesus was here and he sweated blood. Okay, you would say this piece of rock did not look exactly like the painter. That's probably because this painter did not go to Jerusalem to look at it. However, it can also be said that there is this picture in this church where the rock is that shows this rock is in two tiers. So it's possible that the rock has two tiers. Maybe there's another layer underneath. Okay, so this is a mosaic, which is, MOSAIC, that is 马赛克哈拼图. This is a mosaic of the agony. So when you say the agony, people know you're talking about this thing. And there's also another mosaic which shows Judas kissing Christ in order for the Roman soldiers to know which one is Jesus and to arrest the right person. So Judas is considered, a traitor. And the last one is up his sleeves. So it's a magician who would hide things in his sleeves. So when he performs a magic trick, he would pull something out of his sleeve. Something used to be up in his sleeves. Okay. And at the end of the vocabulary, I have a whole lot of other words. Oh, God. There are too many words. Sophia said I should talk about insurrection. I said I have a whole lot of words to talk about today. And first is a runoff, which is a 两轮选举制, and the coup is a 政变. And the 25th Amendment is what we're trying to get Vice President Pence to do. And the Senate majority will soon belong to the Democrats because of two Georgia runoffs. So let's do these first. We have this handsome young man who is 33 years old, and he would be the youngest senator in the Senate. And his name is Jon Ossoff. And here we have an older one who is Raphael Warnock. The two of them both won runoff. And because of that, they put the Senate into a 50-50 split with the new vice president, Kamala Harris. It would put the Senate into the Democratic Party's hand. So what is a runoff? It is let me see this one. This is a runoff, 两轮选举制. When you have an election with more than two people, then it's quite likely that after you choose one of the five, this person you voted for would not gather enough votes to become the winner, because there are too many candidates and the votes are divided among them. If one person did not get enough votes to be declared the winner, then there will be a second round of elections. So that's why it's called round two. This is called, the two selected here go into this part to go through the process of a runoff. And then you would choose one of them, and theoretically one of them would definitely win more than the other, and he will or she will be declared the winner. That's how it works. That's called a runoff. So what is a coup? It's a simplified word for coup d'etat. So it's two French words. A coup of the state. A coup of the state. You don't say this P and you don't pronounce this T. So it's coup d'etat. It is just a 政变, okay? So it's a overthrow or takeover, or in the German word, it's called a push. Is to remove an existing government from power, usually through violent means, that is illegal, unconstitutional. That's called a coup. So right now, many people are saying Trump what he did last Wednesday was a coup. He wants to overthrow the vote of the Electoral College so that he became the winner somehow, which is just not conceivable. However, he is delusional. He's delusional, 就是他已经失去理智了哈。Delusional, delusion 就是有幻觉 or hallucination, hallucination or hallucinate. Okay, let's do Shen. Hallucination is usually you took some kind of narcotic drug and you become hallucination. So you could see things that other people cannot see. However, delusion is your mind is wrong, not necessarily from a drug or something. They're very similar, but the minor difference is you're delusional is you just would not accept what everybody could tell was the fact, and you believe in something that is in your mind, but not in anyone else's mind. And the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution is one of the later amendments that tells us what to do when the president cannot conduct his presidential business. And this happened in 1967. It's a few years after JFK was assassinated. People decided that we should have an amendment to spell out explicitly how we can remove a president, even if he did not want to. In JFK's case, which is President Kennedy, he died on the same day. So we were fortunate to be able to swear in the next, his vice president to become the new president. But they wonder what if he became unconscious or something else instead of dying. So they decided to spell out what should be done. And this amendment was invoked many times since, because when a president was going into surgery, he would make a statement saying, in case I don't wake up or in case I became disabled, then my vice president would be the president. However, it has never been that the president was alive but refused to go while others think that he should go. So this is a 25th Amendment, Section 4, that has never been used. Because in Section 3, it says a president can do it himself, or other people can convince him to do it. However, it did not say how to force him out. And this is what we're facing right now. It's the Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. That is, a president is incapable. He was incapacitated, which means he no longer has the capacity. He having no capacity to be a president, to function as a president. But he is unable to say anything. For example, he is a vegetable person, became in a coma, or he is unwilling to do something. We all know he could not do it, but he's unwilling to say that because he was crazy. Then the Section 4 come into place so that the vice president and half of the cabinet, the majority, more than half of the cabinet members, 就是部长, they all agree that the president should go. Then they would write a certain kind of declaration, and the president immediately was removed temporarily. He was still the president, but he could contest it. He could say, no, I don't think that's right, and so on and so forth. They could argue and have hearing and so on and so forth, but he would be immediately removed, even though he is still he is still the president, but the vice president will become the temporary president. Okay, so the other thing we talk about is the Senate majority, because before that day, before last Wednesday, we have senators, 50 Republican and 48 Democratic senators, except for 2 that were decided on that day. And both 2 runoff election happened in Georgia, and both went to the Democratic Party. So it becomes 50 versus 50. And the president of the Senate in name is the vice president. So it'll be Kamala Harris starting January 20th. And she would be able to cast the tie-breaking vote. So if something came up that's 50-50 when after everyone casts their vote, then vice president would at this moment be able to vote for one side or the other to break the tie. That's called a tiebreaker. Tiebreaker. So because of this tiebreaker, the Democratic Party became the party of a majority instead of the Republican. So they could have more power in assigning committee chairs. They may not choose their own party members for chair of every single committee. However, that's what happened right now. All the committee chairmen are Republicans, but so they have more power to choose the chairs of the committee, and they also control agenda and the schedule. That's what Mitch McConnell has been doing for the past 4 years. Yeah, he single-handedly could control agenda and the schedule, and every time something needs to be done, he could say no, and nobody can say no to him. They will let him do it. So this is a huge power that he could do, and he did it. For example, when Obama, actually, that's why he was majority leader during Obama's time, probably for 8 years. So he was probably 12 years. I don't know. I need to do more study, but Mitch McConnell was the Senate majority leader, and he controlled the agenda and schedule, and he stopped Obama from doing many, many, many things. And when Trump became the president, he helped Trump to do many, many other things that reversed Obama's doing. So this is a hugely important thing, to have a tiebreaker in the Senate, so that the Senate could have the control. Okay, the rest of them I need to go really, really fast. We have Insight. It's a Shandong and Tiaobo. If you want to keep a copy of it, just press the print screen button on your computer, and it'll go to, for example, in my case, it'll go to my Microsoft Cloud OneDrive. You can do that. Maybe it'll go to your Google Drive, or you can go watch the video later on YouTube, and you could go to whichever slide you want to look at and pause it. Then you can do some notes. You don't have to work so hard to write notes. Okay, so we have incite, instigate, insurrection. These are all terrible words. Sedition and the treason and riot and domestic terrorism. All these are describing what happened on that day. But if you ask a Republican, he or she may say, no, it's not really a coup, not really a insurrection, not really is whatever. But it's clearly not a peaceful protest. That's for sure. Huh? We consider that domestic terrorism, and it's mostly the white supremacists, the people who believe white people are above everyone else. Any colored people are below them. And they were really angry that when they look around, there are so many colored people and they are getting more and more a minority of the population. So they loved Trump. I often think, cannot have so many stupid people believing in Donald Trump, but then I realized that they were not that they're possibly not dumb. They just are white supremacists. And Donald Trump is their only hope to achieve their goal. So they want to keep Donald Trump, even though they could clearly see he is stupid, he is a liar, he is a self-centered, narcissistic person, and so on. But they, being white supremacists, would love Trump to keep on being their president. Of all these words, we have more or less acquainted with these words. However, this accelerationism is something quite new. It's to 加速, increase the speed. To increase the speed of what? This is the accelerationism. It is that they think capitalism and its negative processes should be accelerated in order to trigger a revolt. This is what they want to accelerate. And the people who believe in that are mostly now neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and white supremacists, because these are the far right people. However, when you talk about accelerationism, there are people on both sides. There are people on the left side that also wanted acceleration, but they wanted to accelerate in a direct direction. What we see now, the accelerationists are the far right people. Okay, I've never been this late before, but maybe you can go home and watch this. Should I show it to you? Okay. Share screen. I have this. Where is this one? Okay, this one and this one and this one. Okay.
This song doesn't need any introduction in this town, and let's hear you sing it with us. In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone as she wheeled her wheelbarrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, and sure 'twas no wonder, for so were her father and mother before, and they both wheeled their barrows through streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She died of a fever, and no one could would save her, and that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. But her ghost wheels her barrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive. Oh, on you go, let's hear you. Oh, you can do better than that. Let's hear you now. Alive.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here. Let's go back to where we were. I think it's this one, yeah. And as usual, these songs were very simple with hardly any words. You probably don't know cockles and mussels. They're just some kind of shellfish. Yeah, and there's a fishmonger. You may not know the word monger, which means the seller. So 卖鱼的人就是 fishmonger, and 卖 meat or beef monger or vegetable monger. That's what monger means. But sometimes we say a rumor monger, which means this guy is engaged in spreading rumors all the time. That's called a rumor monger. Okay. Rumor 就是谎言哈. And then she died. This is cockle. The dictionary says 鸟蛤, but just some kind of clam. And these are mussels, they are darker. Cantonese call them 青口. And if it's dried, we call them 淡菜. But this one I've never heard of. 五孔一贝, it's the official name for it. And we could farm it now. And this is the unofficial anthem of Dublin. Dublin is the capital of Ireland. You have two Irelands. The northern part is Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, United Kingdom. There are 6 counties up there. And you have the rest of them. I think there are 26 counties below that. That's the Irish Republic. And the capital is Dublin. And in 1988, it's Dublin's millennial celebration. Dublin established for 1,000 years. Okay, so that's just a little bit after William the Conqueror came from France to London, to Hastings. And that year was 1066. So William the Conqueror came to England. Then in 22 years, Ireland was established as there's some kind of government there. So that day was declared, June 13 was the Molly Malone Day, and they decided they voted the Molly Malone, this song, to be their anthem, city anthem. And this is a picture I took of Molly Malone in 2012. And you can see that she wheeled a wheelbarrow with baskets of seafood in it. And this got plaques on it. And there's some kind of tram or bus behind her. However, if you go to the same place, you wouldn't see her there. This is where she is now. She was moved to a new location because they were going to build some kind of tram system in the old place. So starting 2014, she is here. So that's not a picture taken by me. And they call her the tart with a cart, or trollop with the scallops, because they think she was a whore. She didn't exist. She's a fictional person. And she wearing that very low cut dress with huge breasts underneath made people think that she was a whore. whore is a prostitute. And this is a similar poem that I picked. 去年今日此门中，人面桃花相映红. Last year, right inside this door, I met a beautiful girl whose face just reflects beautiful peach blossom. They made each other look even brighter red. Okay. 人面不知何处去，桃花依旧笑春风. And now this beautiful girl is gone. I don't know where she is, but still the peach blossoms are still smiling in the spring breeze. This is a very, very simple word and tells a very simple story. Did I say a very simple word? It's a very simple poem, and it tells a very simple story, and it affects so many people. When people read it, they were so moved. So that's why I chose it. It is similar to that Molly Malone. Every day she comes out with a cart of seafood, but then one day she's gone, she's dead. This is a story later in Taiping Guangji, which may or may not be true, because Taiping Guangji was a collection, an anthology. Can I write this here? And anthology. Anthology is a collection of good articles that you like, and you collected them all together into one book, which is an anthology of whatever you choose as your criteria. So it could be like 全唐诗, which means a group of people working together to comb through all the possible poems in the Tang Dynasty and collect the best they think. It becomes an anthology of Tang Dynasty poems. However, it could also be something that a teacher or a professor, he chose all these, a collection of essays, short stories, and poems and whatever. He made that into a collection and published it and used that as his textbook. And other professors may also use the same book that he published as their textbook. So probably on our shelves, we also have some anthologies of some kind that collect certain kinds of literature works. And this Taiping Guangji was collected and written in the next dynasty. The Song is after Tang, while Cui Hu is in Tang Dynasty, and this Taiping Guangji was published much later. So the story may or may not be true. It says Cui Hu, the poet who wrote that, he did not pass the imperial examination. 就是科举考试没有成功哈。So on the 5th day of April, or I did tell you about the Chinese calendar, the lunar solar lunar calendar, and the 节气 哈. And the Qingming would be one of the 节气, which in our Western calendar would probably be April the 5th. It could also be another day, maybe the 6th, but most of the time it's April the 5th, if you go by where the sun is. And in Chinese calendar, it moves from time to time, and usually it's in the 3rd month, which is not March. And so one day, the poet went to the south of the city, and he came to a village where he came to this family home with beautiful flowers growing, and he knocked on the door, for a while, nobody came out. Then a woman appeared, opening the door with a crack, and asked, "Who is it?" And he said, "I'm just a person alone looking to see beautiful scenery in the spring, and I became thirsty, and I wish to get to drink some wine. Beg you to give me some wine." So this girl opened the door and let him drink some water. It looks like water to me. And just lean on the nearby tree. It's a peach tree. And watching him affectionately. And this poet was moved, and he left. And this woman was reluctant to see him go. And they never saw each other again. So the next year, also on the same day, the poet came to the same place, and the windows and door was shut, and nobody was there after he knocked. So he wrote this poem right on the face of the door. Chinese poets often write the poems they composed right there on the wall or on the door or on something right there. Well, this is very common. And then after a few days, he came to the same place, and there was an old man who came out, and he said, "My daughter reached the age of 今年, it could be 15 or 20. A girl is considered mature to be married at age 15, and that's when this ceremony could happen, to pin her hair into a bun, and on top of the hair it would be a thing like a chopstick that goes through that. That's the ceremony for a girl who turned 15 and was about to be married. However, if she's not married, it could be a few years later, but no later than age 20. This is called the 鸡年, the age of maturity for a girl. So it's between 15 and 20. And my daughter did not marry, and ever since last year, the same day, she behaved as if something was lost. And the other day, we went out, and when we came back, and we saw your poem on the door, and my daughter read it and became heartsick, and she stopped eating and she died. So it is you who killed my daughter. And this old man cried and cried. And the poet was really moved, and he asked to be led into the girl's room, and the girl was there, and 既举其手振其鼓而祝曰. Okay, so the poet raised the girl's head and put it using his own thigh as a pillow, and put the girl's head there, and he cried and declared that I am here, and the girl revived. Okay, the girl became alive, and the father was delighted and married the girl to this poet. And this poet later became he passed the imperial examination, and he became a Jingzhaoying, which means the city of the mayor of the capital. And he went through several different positions and ended up as Lingnan Jiedushi. So he was a governor of the south of the mountain, which means in the maybe Fujian and the Guangdong and the Guangxi, this area, he was the governor of that large area. And in Quan Tang Shi, which I just mentioned, an anthology of Tang Dynasty poems, there are 6 poems that were written by Cui Hu. And this one is by far the most famous. I myself have never read any of those other five poems. I have them collected and read it the other day, but they are not they're not easy to memorize. Okay, let's just say that. But this is such a simple story that makes everybody feel, oh yes, I understand his feeling. That's why it became so famous. And that is for today. I'm sorry it went on so long. Maybe I should trim it a little bit later. Okay, do we have any questions? Did I lose any of you? Oh my God, where are you? Okay, you are there. Okay, okay. Any questions?
No, just thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because of this riot last week, we had to do so many different words, and the background, the political background of these things. Yeah, now you know, or maybe you already knew. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
谢谢老师。
谢谢。
Thank you. Thank
谢谢。
you. Thank
不
you.
客气，不客气。We had a
晚
sunny
安。
day earlier. Yeah, the sun went away. Yeah. I believe we had more rain than any other year before. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you.
谢谢。
谢谢。
再见。
Share.
再见。
Bye.
Bye.